Every country in the world is in debt. The United States is in debt. China is in debt. Europe is in debt. Even the richest nations on earth owe trillions of dollars. So here's the real question no one asks often enough. If everyone owes money, then who exactly owns the world's debt? Who is the lender when the entire planet is the borrower? Today on Finance Timekeeper, we're going to answer that question clearly, calmly, and without conspiracy theories. Because the real answer is far more interesting and far more powerful than most people realize. Right now, total global debt is well over $300 trillion. That's government debt, corporate debt, household debt, a number so large that it's almost meaningless unless we break it down. So let's slow this down and start with a simple truth. Every debt is someone else's asset. When one country borrows, another entity is lending. When a government issues a bond, someone buys it. When a company takes a loan, someone collects interest. Debt does not disappear. It changes hands. Now let's break the world's debt into three big buckets. First, government debt. Second, corporate debt. Third, household debt. Globally, governments owe roughly 1/3 of all debt. Corporations owe another large chunk. And households, mortgages, student loans, credit cards make up the rest. But the most important and powerful category is government debt. Because governments don't just borrow money. They borrow authority. When a government issues debt, it is making a promise backed by future taxes, future growth, and future generations. So who buys that promise? The first and biggest buyer is central banks. After the 2008 financial crisis, and again after COVID, central banks stepped in and bought massive amounts of government bonds. In the United States, the Federal Reserve became the single largest holder of U.S. government debt. This process is called quantitative easing. In simple terms, the government spends money, the central bank creates money, and buys government bonds to keep the system stable. This means a country is often borrowing from itself. But central banks are not the only lenders. The second major group is domestic institutions. Commercial banks, insurance companies, pension funds, mutual funds. If you have a retirement account in the United States, chances are part of your money is invested in government bonds, which means this might surprise you. You may already own government debt. Teachers, firefighters, office workers, retirees. Through pensions and funds, everyday Americans are major lenders to the U.S. government. The third major group is foreign governments and investors. This is where most headlines focus. China, Japan, the United Kingdom, oil-rich nations. These countries run trade surpluses, earn dollars, and then invest those dollars in U.S. Treasury bonds. As of today, foreign countries hold roughly 1/3 of U.S. government debt held by the public. Japan is the largest foreign holder. China is no longer number one, a fact that shocks many people. And here's the key insight most people miss. Foreign ownership sounds scary, but it also means something very important. If foreign countries want the U.S. to remain stable, they must protect the value of U.S. debt because they own it. In other words, lenders want borrowers to survive. Now zoom out from the United States and look globally. Most government debt around the world is owned domestically. Countries largely borrow from their own banks, their own funds, and their own citizens. The idea that a secret group owns all global debt is simply not true. The real system is more subtle. It's a web of institutions, incentives, and trust. Now let's talk about corporate debt. Corporations borrow trillions of dollars to expand, invest, acquire competitors, and sometimes just survive. That debt is owned primarily by banks, bond investors, insurance companies, and increasingly private credit funds. Corporate debt fuels growth, but it also increases fragility. When interest rates rise, heavily indebted companies struggle. And when companies struggle, jobs disappear. Finally, household debt. Mortgages, student loans, auto loans, credit cards. Household debt is mostly owned by banks and financial institutions. But here's the twist. These loans are often bundled together, turned into securities, and sold to investors. So once again, pensions and funds reappear as debt holders. This brings us to a powerful realization. The world's debt is not owned by villains. It is owned by the system. Banks, funds, governments, and indirectly, people like you. Now let's step back and ask a deeper question. How did the world get comfortable with this much debt? The answer begins in 1971. That's when the United States ended the gold standard. Money was no longer tied to gold. It became fiat backed by trust. This single decision unlocked unlimited borrowing potential. Governments could now issue debt without physical constraints. Then came globalization. Then financial innovation. Then central bank intervention. Each crisis added more debt. Each rescue normalized higher borrowing. Debt became the default solution. Economic slowdown, borrow. Crisis, borrow more. Pandemic, borrow trillions. And as long as lenders believe the system will hold, it does. But debt has consequences. High debt means higher interest payments. Higher interest payments mean less room for public spending. And rising rates expose weak borrowers. The danger is not debt itself. The danger is losing trust. Because debt works only as long as people believe it will be repaid. So who really owns the world's debt? The honest answer is this. Governments own each other's promises. Institutions own claims on the future. And citizens are both the lenders and the collateral. Debt is power. Debt is leverage. Debt is influence. And understanding who owns it means understanding how the world really works. This is Finance Timekeeper, where we track money, power, and time. If this video helped you see global debt differently, make sure you subscribe for more deep financial storytelling. Because in a world built on IOUs, knowledge is the only real asset you fully own.